Hello and welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 65, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today I'm joined by Kip Adams, Director of Conservation for the Quality Deer Management Association, and we're covering the 2018 Whitetail Report. So stay tuned. All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Hope everyone is having a good Wednesday, hump day. You're almost there. The weekend's almost here. Deer work is in full swing this time of year. Velvet Fest has kicked off. Hopefully everyone's finding some time to get out into the timber and get some cameras in the woods and get ready for the season. I had a weekend full this past weekend of all kinds of cool hunting and related stuff, man. I went to TAC this past weekend in Seven Springs, Pennsylvania, and shot with some buddies. Tim Bunau from New York. The bow hunting fiend was there, but he and I we crossed paths. He wasn't able to make it there on Saturday. The rain held off on Saturday, fortunately, and we did get to shoot weather free to a degree. And man, that's a tough course. I lost a few arrows. Didn't come back with all the arrows that I took, but it was a fun course nonetheless. Got to hang out with my buddy Bo. And recorded a podcast with him that'll be coming out soon. I'll let you guys know when that happens. He's got a new thing that he's doing called East Meets West. It's really kind of all about adventure hunting and stuff like that. And so that was super cool to kind of hang out with him. And it's just a good time, man. It's just a bunch of hunters and hanging out, shooting bows and talking deer hunting, man. It's just everyone's kind of you can kind of tell that everyone's mind has kind of now shifted now that turkey season is over and everyone's kind of focusing in fully on whitetail season and with good reason. It was just kind of a nice sign in being there and getting to talk to everyone, trading deer stories. You could tell everyone was just kind of getting pumped up for the season. So I did get to do then on Sunday a little bit of deer work. I got to head to the newest property, my dad's property, and go pull some cards. I know it's early to pull cards. I know that the deer aren't sporting a ton of bone at this point in terms of velvet, but I couldn't help myself. I was nearby, was passing through on my way to TAC, so I figured I would stop in and pull the cards. They'd been sitting out all year for the most part, and hadn't checked anything since I think March 26th maybe, or March 25th. So they've been sitting for a while. Just kind of curious. I'm still kind of learning this property and understanding how the deer are using it at different times of the year, and so did that today or on Sunday rather. And got to play in the rain pretty much for the entire day because it was a soaker. So but nothing ventured, nothing gained. Did have a cool encounter with a little buck that was kind of fun. It was super rainy, and of course I'm sure he probably couldn't hear me because there was a drainage that I was walking up and water was rushing down it, and the water of course from the rain was hitting the leaves, and I'm sure his scent his ability to smell at that point probably wasn't great with the amount of moisture that was in the air and on the ground. And I was able to kind of creep up on him to probably 15 yards and just kind of watched him for a little while, for probably 5 minutes, just watched him be a deer, man. And it was one of those things that really, I was already kind of geeked up and ready for the season. If I wasn't beforehand, I was after that, because that was just kind of a really cool way to kick off Velvet Fest for me, was to kind of creep up on that little buck and watch him just be a deer, and then think about, hopping into a tree stand and how soon that'll, time will fly by and we'll be back into a tree stand. I'll be watching that with a bow in my hand, and I'm just, already super pumped about it. So, that was kind of my weekend. It was all full of deer work and good things, back into the grind of the week. And I won't belabor the point here on the upfront. We have an awesome podcast today. It's a guy that I've wanted to have on for a little while, Kip Adams from Quality Deer Management Association. Kip's a guy I've listened to for a while on a bunch of different, in terms of different writings that he's done, different videos and other podcasts that he's been on, and I've always wanted to have him on. In full transparency, this podcast was recorded just a few weeks ago, because Kip and I's calendars happened to sync up at that time, and I wanted to take advantage of his free time to get him on the show. So some of the stuff we talk about in terms of turkey hunting and stuff like that, you'll notice is a little bit delayed in terms of recency. But the content that we cover, I think, is really important. We cover everything from the status of CWD and the things that are going on in that regard. And we talk a lot about, a little bit about, hunting heritage and what's going on as we continue to think about hunter recruitment and things of that nature. And then, of course, we dive into some of the specifics as far as some of the information in the 2018 Whitetail report, as far as the statistics go, in terms of, things that are kind of eye popping to him that kind of stuck out as they were doing the analysis. So with that, let's take a quick second to talk about our partners that help us make this podcast possible. We are brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest lasting, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We are also brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear. The new Exodus Trek is a byproduct of all the consumer voices who have been excited about what Exodus has to offer, but just can't fit a $200 camera in their budget. And that's okay. A budget-friendly camera backed by the industry's leading warranty is now here. The Exodus Trek comes in at $145. It has the same proprietary shell design as the Lift series cameras and has the same 5-year warranty and unmatched customer service policies, 0.7-second trigger speed, photo, video, time lapse, and hybrid modes that we've all come to love, all with a simple line backlit LED display. And you get approximately 20,000 images on a set of lithium batteries. If you'd like to learn more about Exodus trail cameras, check them out at ExodusOutdoorGear.com and use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself $20 on a new cam. We're also brought to you by Tecumani Seed. Everything is bigger in Texas. No matter if you're in the South, Midwest, or the Northeast, Tecumani Seed has your food plot needs covered. Visit Tecumani.com and check out their product selector tool to help you pick the right seeds for your food plot needs. Use promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20%. And we are also brought to you by Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. Whether you're hunting, camping, or fishing, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Visit them at glaciercoolers.com. Use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20%. And with that, let's go ahead and get Kip on the line. All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have a special guest, the guy I've been looking forward to having on for quite some time. I'm also proud to say that he is a fellow Keystoner. He hails from I believe Knoxville, Pennsylvania, or the area of Knoxville, PA, and is also works with the QDMA in a very large capacity. I'm sure a lot of you folks out there that are big into deer hunting and just understanding deer habitat, deer biology, know who I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of the one and the only Kip Adams. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing good, Clint. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So, I know that you're not I guess people aren't unfamiliar with you in the world of deer hunting and so forth. You've done a lot of the circuits of podcasts and stuff like that. That's kind of where I got turned on to you, and then of course found out that you were also from Pennsylvania, which made me even that much more excited. Hoping you're a Steeler fan. Is that affirmative?
Actually, you know what? Being from northern Pennsylvania, I'm a long ways from Pittsburgh. I actually grew up a Miami Dolphins fan.
Well, you are like the second person that I've talked to that's from that neck of the woods. There's a fellow by the name of Mike Perry, a big time, public land hunter that I've become friends with that lives, I think, around where you live. And he is also a Miami Dolphins fan. Is that like the Dan Marino era? Is that what swayed you? The Don Shula, like late 70s and then the Dan Marino draft?
Yeah, actually, I'm a bit older than that. We're not all that far from Syracuse.
Okay.
And my dad was always an Orangeman fan. So when Larry Zonka graduated from Syracuse and got drafted by the Dolphins, my dad became a Dolphin fan. So my brother and I grew up. The only football team we knew was the Miami Dolphins. So I've been a Dolphin fan for a long time.
All right. Well, we won't hold that against you too much, I guess.
And I've got to be a serious Dolphin fan to admit that I'm a Dolphin fan.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've all had some lean years, and I'm sure the Steelers' lean years after Ben retires are going to be right around the corner. So we'll get the full effect of that. But speaking of your background a little bit there, you just kind of gave us a little bit of background about where your family's from and how you became a Dolphins fan. But if you wouldn't mind, for those out there that are listening that maybe aren't as familiar with you as I am, just give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, how you started hunting, and of course what you do professionally.
I grew up in north central Pennsylvania, actually on a dairy farm, so I have just been around the woods my entire life, and I was very lucky. I grew up in a hunting family. My dad hunted. My paternal grandmother hunted. My uncles hunted. My maternal grandfather hunted. My friends hunted. Everybody I knew hunted. It was just the most natural thing in the world for me to hunt. And I understand that's certainly a lot different for folks today. But that's kind of what I grew up into. And at a very early age, I decided that, you know what, I want to be a wildlife biologist when I grow up. So I went to Penn State. I got my undergraduate degree at Penn State. Left there. I went to the University of New Hampshire to get my graduate degree. And from there, actually got a job working for the state of Florida. Man, I had never been to the southern U.S.
Wow.
And, certainly, I didn't want to go to Florida. I wanted to stay in the north, but that's the only job that I had. So I went, and it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to an aspiring deer biologist. To get out of the north, to see a different culture of deer hunter, to learn see deer in a different habitat, did me a world of good. So I worked for the state of Florida for 4 years. I went back to New Hampshire and was New Hampshire Fish and Game's deer and bear biologist. So I ran their deer and bear programs for a couple of years, and it was during that time that I learned about QDMA. QDMA had sent an announcement for some educational materials to every state's deer project leader. So I got it, read a little bit about QDMA, became a member immediately, and thought, this is great. I need to be a part of this. And then lo and behold, just a little bit after that, QDMA advertised the very first position working for them in the Northeast, and I applied and got it. And that was just about 16 years ago now. So that I've seen a lot of changes at QDMA over the years, but it has been a great ride, and I've been very fortunate to get to work in the different places that I have, Clint.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's awesome that someone, it's interesting you had that, that passion or that kind of foresight, knowing exactly kind of what you wanted to do at a young age and kind of followed it through, and it led you back home. And I don't know that you could have found a better fit for you, you know what I mean, in terms of, where you're from and, how much of a hunting culture, specifically a deer hunting culture that Pennsylvania has, or a heritage might be a better way to put it, and kind of placed you in the perfect environment to kind of help, be a steward for that, not just for Pennsylvania, but nationally as well. I do want to take a quick second, and just talk a little bit about QDMA. And I know we're going to dive into some of the Whitetail report from this past year that you all put out. But I want to just talk a little bit about some of the initiatives you guys kind of have going on, and just kind of get a little bit of an update. I know I've talked to, had Lindsay on, and that was a great conversation. Had Ryan on, just kind of give me, I guess, a little bit of a status update of how you guys are doing in terms of, your initiatives and mission for this year. I know you guys kind of set some new 5-year goals here this past year when you were in New Orleans.
We did, and I am super excited about those, mostly because they really all speak specifically to what our mission is, with regard to, providing money for research and helping, on-the-ground management projects, venison donation, mentoring hunters, those kind of things, that it just really hits home for where I think we need to be today as a hunting culture. So I'm super proud of what our goals are. We are doing well, certainly within the ones that we can measure thus far in 2018. Many of them we'll have a much better handle on here in a couple months. Our membership survey is about to go out, so it'll go out in May, and that provides a lot of the data for us, such as the pounds of venison that our members donate a year, the acres that our members are involved in QDM cooperatives with, the number of hunters that they mentored last year, those type of things we get from that survey. So a lot of the metrics that we have to measure where we are, we're going to be getting in the coming months. So it's an exciting time for us.
Nice. Yeah, I know it's I was excited to see, the goals you guys had put out. And I know that in terms of recruitment, you guys have some really great lofty goals. It sounds like, and whenever I was talking to Ryan and Lindsay, it sounds like we're tracking in a good space to meet those, and I can speak for me personally. It definitely inspired me to the point of, making sure that not only am I, taking my daughter out as I always do every year from that perspective and introducing the youth, but it's, one of those things that I've been harping on. And I'm sure people are probably tired of hearing me talk about it because it's a little bit of my soapbox, but it's really the adult recruitment aspect of it. And I'm happy to say it's like I'm introducing my first adult this year. It was one of those things where, I think we as hunters, we were of course concerned with, the outdoors and conservation, and want to make sure we're doing as much as we can. And we talk about it, and we're passionate about it, and it's one of those things where, I took the look in the mirror, as I hope a lot of folks do, and just had to ask myself the tough question of whether or not I felt like I was doing enough. Could I do more? And was I doing everything that I could do within my means? And I had to answer that honestly. And the answer was no, and like there was this gap that I felt that I could fill and do more, which was taking an adult hunter, or adult out and introducing them to hunting. So I'm doing that this turkey season. He's super stoked. He's pumped up to go. And I can't wait to get him out in the woods, because not only is he excited, but I get to kind of experience all those firsts again with him, which is a really cool thing. So you still there?
Yeah, I got you, Clint. You cut out on me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did. I'm sorry
you
about.
You were talking too long, and all of a sudden, your voice trailed off.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I was just mentioning how excited I am to take my first adult out hunting this year, to do some adult hunter recruitment. So I'm really excited to make that one of my goals for this year and accomplish that. So, and following along with the goals you guys have set. So.
That's good. We actually, our senior director of operations challenged all of TDMA staff to do that as well. To take somebody like that, and certainly, there's a lot of pizzazz, I guess, with taking a youth hunter. But man, there is so much more bang for our buck if we can take an adult hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we can need to continue taking those youth for sure. But kudos to you for taking an adult. That will make an immediate impact on a number of hunters, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, he's pretty excited about it. I can already see it in him that I don't think this will be his first and only hunt. I think he's already kind of getting the bug, and he hasn't even heard a turkey gobble yet. So that's a good sign.
Well, good deal.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you before we jump into some of this report talk, man. How was your past season? I follow you, of course, on Instagram and so forth, and I think you had some kiddos out this year that had some good luck too.
Oh my gosh, I have been hunting for a long time, and I joke with my wife and tell every year, gosh, I think I enjoyed it more this year than last year. And I am certainly a very passionate hunter, and just get all tore up with it. But I will say, I can honestly say 2017 may have been my best year ever, in large part because of what other people shot while I had them with me.
Right.
My young daughter shot her first deer on opening day of archery season. So our whole season was just going to be great because of that. She then shot her first buck on the opening day of Pennsylvania's rifle season, which was pretty cool. I ended up shooting a few deer with my even younger son sitting with me for all of them. It turned out I actually shot a nice buck on our place.
Nice.
That I thought was 4.5 when I shot him, and it turned out with some animal analysis that he was actually 5.5, which made it even a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
But maybe even more, I think, interesting than that is my son was with me during archery season, and I shot a doe that when I looked at the jawbone, saw clearly, this was probably the oldest deer I've ever shot. And I knew there was a good chance that it may even hit 10.5 years old. We sent that in sizer away as well, and it came back that she was 13.5 years old.
Wow. Yeah, I remember.
So,
I remember seeing that post.
Super, super proud. So, but it made it that much better that my little boy was with me. So, but there was some other great hunts that we had with my brother and with my nephews and some others that I mentored. So, overall, 2017 was just absolutely outstanding for me. I was very, very lucky for sure.
Nice, man. That's an awesome season. Do you get a chance to get out and hit some other states, or do you primarily hunt Pennsylvania?
I primarily hunt Pennsylvania. I try to hunt one other state each year. I'm lucky. I actually get asked, like QDMA members usually, to hunt in quite a few other states, and I don't. I politely decline in almost every case, and the reason being, I travel so much for work during the year,
right,
that when the fall comes, I just really want to be home and take my kids hunting.
Yeah.
So that's the largest part, and also, we're lucky to have property. We manage this heavily. We've done a lot of habitat work, and so I would much rather shoot a deer, here that because of our management, than something that's even much larger somewhere else.
Right.
Really not. I don't like shooting a big buck. I love shooting big deer, but it means more to me, if I am home with that. So So I do most of my hunting here. I typically get away for at least one other hunt each year. And actually last year I ended up making away. I went to Colorado and also did a little bit of hunting in Kentucky. So it was a really good year that way for me. But
Nice.
95% of my hunting, Clint, is in Pennsylvania and is right here at home with my kids sitting with me.
Man, you can't beat that, man. I can't fault you there. I definitely enjoy whenever I get a chance to get my kiddo out in the woods, and she's already been asking me about going and doing some deer hunting. She shoots a compound, and she's getting pretty proficient with it. So hopefully it's just around the corner. I think this year will be the first year I take her and put her in a tree stand with me while I do a hunt, because she's been asking.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal. You're going to have a blast.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm gonna change gears here real quick, man, and I want to get to some of the stuff that I had a chance to read and peruse in the Whitetail report, the 2018 Whitetail report, and kind of touch on a couple of the topics that are in that. For anyone out there listening that hasn't picked this up or isn't aware of it, I highly recommend you pick it up for any deer hunter that's into understanding what's going on with the deer herd, not just in your state but at large. It's a great resource. I usually it's not a extremely difficult read, but it's a very informative read, and I usually kind of break it up on train rides and stuff like that and read it over the course of the year, it seems like. But I want to touch on a couple topics before we get to specifics. I want to just get a sense from you as you were putting the report together. What were some of the high level trends that you noticed? And if there's two or three that kind of stuck out to you, what do you think they mean for hunters and management agencies overall?
Well, I think a couple of the big things are, one, the annual buck harvest. After a pretty big decline for about a decade, the last two seasons has greatly rebounded. So we are shooting a lot more bucks now than we were just a few years ago, which is a good thing. We have really taken a hit on the buck harvest side. So trending up, buck harvest is good. Antlerless harvest continued to trend way down. And actually, in the last decade, our doe harvest is down 20% over the country. That is a huge drop. Some of that is by design. Some states have balanced deer herds with the habitat, so they're actually reducing some antlerless harvest opportunity. But in many cases, there are some really productive states where the agencies are begging hunters to kill more does that the hunters just aren't taking advantage of. And it's very possible, and I really hope this is not the case, Clint, but it's really possible that the season we just finished, for the first time since 1998, we may have killed more antlered bucks than we did antlerless deer.
Wow.
1999 was a landmark year in deer history of deer management, because it's the first time we ever shot more antlerless deer than antlered bucks. And then from 99, through the next 15 years or whatever, we killed a lot more does than we did bucks. But the last few years, that's been getting closer and closer together. And this past year, there's a real good chance that it actually swaps. So as hunters, there's a lot of does we're leaving on the table that we could put in our freezers or give to somebody else to put in their freezer. And we are shooting does at a lower rate right now than we have in a long, long time.
What does, I know just from like a property level perspective, or I won't even say that it's accurate, but a lot of guys will say, wanting to make sure that they're harvesting does to try to keep their sex ratios in balance. Of course, you want to look at just your overall numbers in terms of and understanding what your carrying capacity is for your property and stuff like that. So not just the more localized view notwithstanding, what does the lower doe harvest numbers really kind of mean for deer management, and what's the implication from like a habitat perspective and deer herd, I guess, health perspective?
Well, if the deer herd is below what the habitat can support, lower doe harvest isn't all that big of a deal because you're not hurting anything. However, as soon as that deer herd, there's as many deer as the habitat can really support to keep them in a high quality condition. Then, if it gets above that, low doe harvest hurt health of the deer because basically you're nutritionally restricting those deer. So they're not as healthy as they could be. They're not as big as they could be. Bucks aren't growing as big of antlers as they could. They aren't being as good of mothers to the fawns as they could, which is none of that is good for us or for deer. And if that's the case too, then they start negatively impacting the habitat, which means in the future it can't carry as many deer, and it's also not as good for other wildlife species. So, as hunters, we have a great responsibility to make sure that we shoot, the right numbers of deer each year. And some cases we shoot probably more than we should, and in some cases we shoot fewer. And boy, for the last 5 or 6 deer seasons, we have shot way fewer does than we probably need to. Not everywhere, certainly, but in many places. There's a lot of the productive Midwest where we're shooting a lot more bucks than we are does each year, and that just simply should not happen.
Right. Now, what about, just going to be selfish here for a minute, but what about Pennsylvania? How are we looking in terms of PA, since I'm a PA guy?
Pennsylvania is good. Pennsylvania, we continue to harvest way more antlerless deer than we do antlered bucks. That's a good thing. And, as hunters, we think of, all right, we want to have balanced adult sex ratios. And think about that. You take whatever state you're in, about half of the fawns born are going to be buck fawns, and about half will be doe fawns. So if they start their life at about a 50-50 split, and we want to keep them pretty balanced. And as adults, it means we need to shoot at least as many does as we do bucks each year. And actually, we need to shoot more does than bucks because bucks are kind of like humans. Who does it cost more for vehicle insurance or life insurance? Guys or girls?
Right.
And there's guys, and it's because, we're a lot more likely to do something stupid and kill ourselves.
Right.
It's the same thing with bucks.
Right.
Outside of the hunting season, they're a lot more likely to get killed, with a car or whatever. So anyway,
right.
In the vast majority of the whitetails range, you need to shoot more antlerless deer than you do bucks each year to keep those sex ratios about balanced. Now, once you get up into northern New England and kind of the northern limit of the whitetail range where Mother Nature takes care of a lot of the winter problems, you can manage deer well by shooting more bucks than does. But for most of the U.S., you need to shoot more does than you do bucks, or else deer herds just get all out of whack.
It's interesting. I wonder, I'm just sitting here thinking about, the reasons why that might be. I mean, I'm sure whenever you get into some of these Midwestern states, whether it's in Ohio, Iowa, if you're going to Kansas to hunt or whatever, a lot of guys are taking or girls that are taking those trips. It's like they're trying to fill that tag, a buck tag, because they're trying to do that one hunt that they get to do a year out of state or whatever the case is. Then they're not going to maybe fling an arrow or put a bullet, in a doe until maybe it gets to the end of the trip. And then at that point you may have passed up how many opportunities to take a shot. And then that last day or two, you don't get the shot opportunity that you thought you might get. So do you think there's any credence to that? Just kind of like people, when they take their trips, that's what they're focusing on?
Oh, absolutely. And most people who are traveling many people who are traveling to hunt, certainly are much more focused on shooting a buck than an antlerless deer. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's no question to that. And of course, we both know, the more that you pressure bucks or does, they become harder to kill. So those does that would be easy to shoot, the first few days suddenly become pretty hard later in the season. So if you have a traveling hunter, either they don't get the opportunity or they don't want to take a doe home. So, man, as hunters, it'd be great to convince them to, even if you can't take it home, go ahead. If it's in an area that needs additional antlerless deer shot, shoot it. And there's lots of places that you could donate that, to a local soup kitchen or local family or church or something, and let them take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious, you kind of mentioned a couple trends there that kind of stuck out to you as you guys were putting this report together, but I'm curious if there's anything, or a trend that you noticed that was really concerning to you, or something that we as hunters really kind of need to take notice of as you guys were kind of going over the data.
I think the two trends that are very concerning to me, one is our dwindling doe harvest. That's concerning because there's a lot of choices that hunters are making not to shoot antlerless deer there, and that does not fare well for us. Mm-hmm. And the second trend that is very concerning to me is the continued spread of chronic wasting disease. Mm-hmm. Half of the states in the United States have it now, so over half of the states that have whitetail deer have CWD or have confirmed it, and so that is an extremely alarming trend for the future of hunting.
Right, and I know that I got you guys' newsletter today, and the email that you guys send out, and there was an article that was in there that was about the spread of CWD and why this should scare hunters. Should scare us to death to some degree. And it was the infographic of how many hunters are hunting, in the 4 hot corners of Wisconsin, essentially, and then essentially how that then is kind of spreading out throughout the country. Because some of those hunters are from out of state and so forth. And it showed an infographic of how 49 states in the U.S. hunters went to if I'm getting this correct, hunted Wisconsin, harvested, and then returned to their state. Now, there's no telling that they took back inappropriate animal parts or whatever the case might be. It's just stating the fact that these things do have the ability to travel across state lines. And we know that some of them are making it across these state lines, which is a huge problem and a challenge for, not just state agencies, but for hunters to kind of make sure that they're following the rules and guidelines for moving body parts and so forth. So, I mean, I guess I would love to get your perspective on that. Like, how do we manage something like that? That's so, I don't know, it's ambiguous isn't the right word, but just like there's so many gaps there to try to fill to I guess kind of squash the movement of CWD. Like where do you start?
Yeah, with that one, and I think that map is the place that we can start with it.
Mm-hmm.
Show that hunters shot deer in just those 4 counties of Wisconsin, and took them back to 49 different states, or at least possibly did. We know from a CWD end that the easiest way to move the disease is to move a live deer that has it. No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
So deer that are being transported, among deer farms and facilities, that's the easiest way to move the disease. Now, that's obviously being done by captive deer farmers.
Right.
The second easiest way to move it is by moving the high-risk parts of a harvested deer. The high-risk parts are the brain, the eyes, the spleen, the backbone, the nervous system. We know that if we take a deer that has CWD, move those high-risk parts and deposit them somewhere else, other deer that come in contact with them can get the disease. So that is not, deer farmers far away. That is us as hunters' fault. And this map shows the potential for the amount of material that can be spread all over. So you can have, states that didn't have CWD, that a hunter goes to Wisconsin, to one of those areas, kills a CWD positive, brings it home, and literally can be starting the disease, in his or her area. So all states, or I should say, most states have regulations that don't allow you to bring in the high-risk parts. Some don't allow you to bring them in from just CWD positive states. A growing number of states don't allow hunters to bring those parts in from any state, regardless if it has CWD or not, which is good. Those are all very good rules. The problem is almost no hunters know about them.
Right.
Or even many of the ones that do don't abide by them.
Right.
So what I think we need to do as hunters is, one, we need to make sure that hunters are aware of the potential, the problem with moving parts like that. And secondly, make sure that they know, that you can't do it. So I think that this takes a big push by our state wildlife agencies. And I also think it takes a huge push by us as hunters to make sure that our buddies know, hey, if you're going, wherever, to Wisconsin, wherever, you can't bring that stuff back,
Right.
You can bring back boned out meat and a clean skull plate, and the hide, that's it.
Right.
So I think that is where the next big push really has to come if we want to start helping stop the spread of CWD.
Right. Is there any, I guess, a 2-part question here? I know I've listened to and have read in places and listened to other podcasts where they had some folks on talking about CWD and the challenges and so forth. And then I was actually kind of shocked to understand or to learn that there are people, in the outdoor industry, some of which, work in a science kind of environment, if you will, who still weren't buying in that CWD was a problem or that it existed. Because I understand if there are hunters that would say, I don't see it where I live, so I just think it's something someone has made up, right? Like, even though I'm listening to biologists tell me that this thing is real, right? I can understand a person who maybe just is skeptical just in general about things. Okay, that's fine. But it was shocking to me to hear about some of these folks, and I'm not going to mention names or anything like that, but some of them were people and names that people would know, that weren't bought in to the idea or the notion that this thing actually existed, or if it did exist, it didn't warrant as much attention as it does. Have we started to see more alignment across the board in that regard with, everyone who's involved with trying to correct this thing?
Well, 95% of the wildlife and disease professionals
mm-hmm.
agree this is a huge problem.
Right.
It's a very small number of professionals who don't think it's a problem. Unfortunately, many of those in that very small group have huge audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And, so they use that to their benefit, for self-promotion and in some cases making a lot of money off it. They can say, this is not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. And, if you play the odds or listen, there's always 2 sides to a story. But, when 95% of the professionals are in agreement on this is one of the most severe things that we've ever had to deal with, it is a big deal. And shame on those guys for purposely playing the other side of it, and telling them it's not a deal or not a big deal, because it's just simply not true.
Right. Are there any research advancements that are, have happened, in the recent past that are, I guess positive advancements and trying to figure out how to help, manage this thing a little bit more effectively?
Not really positive advancements. We do continue to learn more about it. So every little bit helps. There's still no cure. There's still no vaccine. There's not a 100% reliable live animal test, and there likely never will be. Partly because this is very similar to the human form of this disease, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and they have literally, over decades, spent over $1 billion to try to find, a blood test that you could use on humans to tell if you had it or not, and they haven't been able to.
Wow.
So if they can't do it on humans with over $1 billion of research, and decades work, there's no way that they're going to be able to endear when there's just simply not the money there for that research, and certainly not the importance of a human test.
Right.
So it's unlikely we're ever going to have a 100% reliable live animal test. One thing that is helping us, I think, in the fight with CWD is there's more research now showing, particularly out west, where the disease has been around for quite a while, that it is causing significant population declines in mule deer herds and in whitetail deer herds. And that's one of the things that a lot of people say is, well, our deer aren't tipping over. I don't see these deer. I think it's okay. Well, the problem is, you almost will never see a sick deer that has CWD. And the reason being is, they get killed by something else first.
Right.
And there's some very recent research that shows that deer that have CWD die at 3 times the rate of normal deer. And they either are eaten by a predator or hit by a car or, something. So that does not fare well for us in the future.
All right, sorry folks, we had a couple technical difficulties there, but for now though, let's go ahead and shift gears maybe to a little bit of a happier topic, or uplifting, if you will. We've covered a couple of the trends you think are something that you see as troublesome to a degree. Let's hear about a couple of the things that you noticed that it really encourages you from the data that you guys were looking at.
Well, I think one that is the hunter support by non-hunters in the U.S. Are at all-time highs. So a very small number of us hunt, which is down to less than 5% of the American public actually hunts. But over 3/4 of the non-hunting, or of the U.S. adult Americans, will say it. So between 75 and 79% of adult Americans support hunting, support legal, ethical, regulated hunting. So that is super good for us, given that we are a minority that do hunt. That this thing that we love to do, and this free service that we provide to society by managing wildlife populations, is supported by that high of a percentage of Americans. So we're very lucky there, and that's a really good trend in our favor.
Right. It's always interesting because I made mention I had written an article. It actually was in Quality Whitetails, and I was super excited. It was my first published article in a hard print copy magazine, so I was excited to do that. And I had mentioned in that article, that I kind of said that we're kind of afforded the privilege of hunting by the grace of 94% of the people in the U.S. to a degree, right? And I think a lot of times it's lost on hunters that, it is the majority that continue to allow us to do this, which means it's that much more important that we represent it in the right way. Because every time you have an encounter with somebody and you talk about hunting, they see you as the hunter. That's their image of a hunter, and so you want to make sure you're painting the correct correct picture for them. But I'm curious, is there, I imagine there's some type of divide, that high percentage of people are supportive of hunting. When you start to maybe classify it differently with different labels or definitions, how does that change? So like, for example, like whether you're referring to it as trophy hunting or sport hunting or whatever the case might be, is there any kind of, I guess, data out there that says, which way the messaging is best, received?
Yes, there is, and they've done a bunch of research on that as well. And the highest support for hunting is when it's used to procure meat for the family. And as soon as you start to put labels on it, such as trophy hunting, support goes way down. So for example, there's over 3/4 of Americans will support you going to hunt deer wherever you may live or go, to provide meat for your family. That same group, only about 1/3 of them would support you going to hunt deer over bait. So as soon as you start talking about baiting for deer, support drops way down. You start talking about hunting inside a fence, support goes way down. So so we do need to be very careful, when we start looking at labels on hunters and that. But fortunately, what QDMA supports the most, and certainly I think the type of hunting that you do, is for free ranging deer, we're out. We're being good stewards of natural resources. We're consuming the venison, we're sharing the venison. That's the type of hunting that has the highest support by non-hunting Americans. So We're very lucky there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all just have to kind of keep in mind when we're posting things on social media, because that's, of course, where things can go awry, right? It's like we've all seen it. Someone posts something, they use the wrong verbiage, right? And then all of a sudden the firestorm kind of lights up. So I think we all just need to make sure that when we're classifying what we do, that we're classifying it correctly. And I hate to say that we have to censor ourselves, right? But it's like, if you want to enjoy the things that we enjoy, you have to take a little bit of the responsibility for it, to ensure that we're able to enjoy it the way we like to, right? Which is, unfortunate, but it's the way the world works, I guess you could say. The one question I do have, though, I want to just jump back, if I could, back to when we were talking about the doe harvest numbers and so forth. I'm assuming that with the doe harvest numbers being down, the fawn recruitment numbers are probably looking pretty solid. Is that the case, or do those two things not kind of go hand in hand with each other? Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Hardcore deer hunters need hardcore tools. Do yourself a favor and check out Wicked Tree Gear, the toughest hand saws and pull saws on earth. You buy it once, you buy it for life, backed by a lifetime guarantee. Right now, if you use the promo code TRUTH, you'll save 20% on your next purchase with free ground shipping. So head over to wickedtreegear.com and get a saw that's tough enough to work as hard as you hunt.
Not exactly. And actually, fawn recruitment rates have plummeted over the last decade and a half. And we monitor that pretty closely at QDMA. So just take a look at fawn recruitment rate is the number of fawns that are alive per doe day one of the hunting season in the fall. So it's not the measure of fawns that are born in the spring. So it's the number that actually make it through almost that first 6 months of life, or first few months anyway, and enter the fall population. So historically, and people think of fawn recruitment rates as being a lot higher than they really are, because they think, does have twins, and so it's got to be. The reality of it is, it's not even near one fawn per doe anymore.
Oh, wow.
About a little over a decade ago, or 15 years ago, it was close to one. It was like 0.89 fawns per doe was the average. Today, that's down to like 0.59. It has dropped way off, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But the thing is, that the average doe today does not recruit a whole fawn in the fall.
Wow.
Some of those fawns died of disease. A lot died of predation. Some to malnutrition. Some get hit by cars. Whatever. But across the board, almost every state's fawn recruitment rate has dropped a lot over the last decade and a half.
Right. And you mentioned a couple of reasons that are possible, but is there any number one culprit as to why we're seeing the fawn recruitment numbers drop the way we are? Is there one thing that we can kind of point to that's changed so drastically over the past 10 years?
Well, I think that there are certain reasons that are more regional than others. For instance, the arrival of the coyote in the southeastern United States over the past decade. Here in Pennsylvania, we've had coyotes forever. Mm-hmm. So, our deer herds have dealt with them for a long time. But there's a lot of states in the southeastern U.S. that really have just gotten coyotes in the past decade. And they have absolutely wreaked havoc on some of those deer populations. All of a sudden, these does, have a new thing to contend with the fawns, and they just aren't very good at protecting them.
Right.
So, my personal opinion is, do coyotes have an impact on deer in Pennsylvania? Absolutely. They absolutely do. Do they have the impact that they do on deer like in South Carolina or something? I'm not even close.
Wow.
our fawn recruitment rate is more stable than many different states. My personal opinion is that black bears eat a lot more fawns, at least in north central Pennsylvania, than coyotes do. But our fawn recruitment rate has not dropped nearly as much. But there are places in the southeastern U.S., where fawn recruitment rates have dropped, to 20 or 30%. Wow. So it means, 7 or 8 out of every 10 fawns born get eaten before they even make it into their first hunting season.
That's a tough life.
That's insane. Yeah, there's places there, that they have dramatically had to reduce antlerless harvest opportunities because those populations just can't handle it anymore. That's not the situation where we are here in the Keystone State, but there's no doubt the predators are having a bigger impact today on fawns than they probably have in a long time.
Right. Now, what about, I guess, loss of habitat? How much does that play into kind of corralling deer herds into possibly smaller areas, with the same amount of predators? Is there anything to that's kind of playing into that fawn recruitment number as well?
There is, and that is probably the biggest thing from the fawn recruitment end. Those fawns have to have good habitat to hide in. And if you take a look just in CRP, our Conservation Reserve Program, which is by far the most successful federal program for wildlife habitat that's ever been implemented, here a couple of years ago, we had a big drop in CRP acreage across the U.S., because of high corn prices. And anyway, we lost a full 25% of all of our CRP acres, within a couple of years, which is just insane. So yes, habitat has had a huge impact on, just places where fawns can hide. So
right, yeah. The one thing
habitat's a big factor.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I was reading in the Whitetail report, it was talking about food plots a little bit. And I would love to get your perspective on this. And I think I know what your perspective is just from reading the Whitetail report, but people have mixed opinions about the use of food plots. I know that they're extremely popular, right? Some people, would maybe not prefer to have food plots because maybe they think it's, drawing deer to a central location. Maybe it's, there's not enough food around the destination food source, so it's damaging the habitat that's kind of surrounding it and so forth. I'm kind of the mind that, whatever it's going to take to get someone who owns a piece of land or leases a piece of land to be involved with their land is okay in my book, because in my opinion, it's a truer through line to conservation if that person has their hands in the dirt managing and can see the fruits of their labor than it is the person that's just kind of showing up and hunting it as it is. I don't know what your feelings are on that. I wanted to get your perspective.
I'm a huge fan of food plots for a lot of different reasons. One is that they certainly can provide food for wildlife, and not just deer. There's a whole variety of wildlife that benefit from a food plot. And some species can provide cover for wildlife. So I am a big fan. The way we look at it at QDMA is, hey, don't try to carry a deer herd with food plots. Do a good job managing the habitat, the forested areas of that habitat, the early successional habitat. Make sure you have enough food and cover there to carry the deer herd. Then just use food plots as kind of like the icing on the cake. Use that as all supplemental stuff, above and beyond. So you can provide tremendous forage with food plots. You can provide places for viewing deer, places to make sure that you can harvest enough antlerless deer. There's lots and lots of benefits of food plots. They far outweigh any of the potential negatives. And there's actually some research showing, that they benefit forest songbirds as well. So it's not just deer or even just species that we can shoot that benefit from these food plots.
Right.
Secondly, and you kind of touched on this, there's a lot of people today that do a lot of really good habitat work for wildlife that started by getting their hands dirty in a food plot. Doing something food plotting is often the bridge that then gets them into doing more work in the forested areas or in the old fields or these early successional habitats. Food plots lead to so much more habitat work and so much more stewardship that I am a huge fan of food plots.
Right. I like to say food plots is the gateway drug for habitat management.
Absolutely. That's a great way to say it. That was way better than the way I said it.
Oh man. So, hey, I want to shift gears here again one more time. And I want to talk a little bit about, hunter recruitment and hunter numbers in general. I know that hunter recruitment, of course, as we touched on at the beginning of the show, is a big initiative for QDMA. And I think it should be a big initiative or something that's important for all hunters, just in general. So I think one of the glaring pieces of data, and we had Ryan on, and we talked a little bit about this as well. But one of the glaring pieces of data in this report is how hunter numbers are trending downwards in a relatively significant way. Both in terms of numbers, just sheer, hunter numbers, and then the dollars contributed to the overall, economy. So I guess my question to you first is, what are some of the things that we can be doing as hunters, and people who love the outdoors and want to make sure that we, continue to have this hunting heritage that we, enjoy so much for a long time and be able to pass it on to other generations? What are some of the things that we should be doing to turn these numbers around?
Well, I think one thing is for sure is, mentoring somebody or taking somebody afield is a great way to get them involved. And then anything that they spend on field equipment, the excise tax can then help fund wildlife management. That's all so important to our state wildlife agencies. So I think that if you know somebody who likes the outdoors, if they're not a hunter, encourage them to buy a hunting license. I do this all the time. Even if they don't want to hunt, that's fine. But just the fact that it's, they are paying for conservation. They're paying to preserve those lands. They're paying to help manage all the wildlife on them. Not just deer or bear and turkeys, but songbirds, butterflies, and everything else. So just making them aware. The average non-hunter has no idea that hunters pay for almost all of conservation.
Right.
So and sometimes just making them aware of it. Do you enjoy wild places? Do you enjoy wildlife? Yeah, well then, hey, it's in peril. We are losing hunters. We're losing the funding source for it. So, if you enjoy that stuff, help out. And buying a hunting license is a great way to do it, even if they have no intention of using it. So I think they also, can talk to them about, the funding model for most state wildlife agencies. The vast majority that comes from license fees, and that is really broke today. It just simply, 30 years ago, it was a great model. It's not a good model today. Mm-hmm. And we need to have some serious changes for most state wildlife agencies, how they're funded, or if we want to continue to maintain the quality of wildlife management that we have today. So whether you're a hunter or a non-hunter, if you like wildlife, that's a discussion that you should be aware of. So I think that we certainly can make others just aware of how important that is.
Right. So I'm curious your opinion on this. Is something that popped up several months ago, and just want to see if you have any thoughts around it. And I know that I read an article where Pennsylvania was kicking around the idea, and this is Pennsylvania specific here, was kicking around the idea of an additional buck tag, right? So I'm just curious what your thoughts on, how that would impact the hunting, the deer numbers, the impact financially, of course. Just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there are certain cases that I think an additional buck can really help the deer management program. I personally don't think that would be a good thing for Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. I think that we have established we have a tremendous hunting culture, and so much of a good management program is based on consistency and just tradition, and and getting hunters to buy into what's going on. And in Pennsylvania, we have a very good track record. We have hunters that know that we have a limit of one buck. Hey, let's put more venison in our freezer than that. I certainly put way more venison in my freezer than one deer a year.
Right.
My family would go crazy if we didn't. So we then, turn our focus to shooting antlerless deer, which is very much needed. I do think that there are cases where if Pennsylvania hunters had a chance to shoot a second buck, they would shoot a lot less antlerless deer. So I don't think that would be a good thing.
Right.
Not necessarily would be a bad thing, I think, in all states, but in our state, I'm not a fan of a second buck tag.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. When I was reading the article, I know they were looking at ways, I think, to make up a deficit of about $1 million. I think that they were saying that they were going to have, or were going to have in the very near future. And I was just curious as to why, they would move directly to potentially looking at a second buck tag option when I don't think there's been an increase on the license cost in like 20 some odd years, like 25 years or something like that, since like the 90s. I think was the last time there was a license increase or a cost increase. Me personally, this is my personal opinion. It's like there has been nothing in 25 years that hasn't seen inflation. And I would assume that, asking someone to pay an extra dollar for a hunting license, multiply that by roughly the 900,000-ish hunters that we have in Pennsylvania, and you've nearly made up your million. So I was just curious why they moved directly to the additional buck tag rather than just looking at the cost increase of the license in general. Do you have any like thoughts or any insight as to why, like maybe was there a biological reason why they were potentially looking at the buck tag, or was it just more of like they thought it was more of an enticing sell from a marketing perspective?
Well, actually, I know it was because of our legislature has held the Game Commission hostage with regard to a license fee increase. The Game Commission does not have the ability to raise prices. The legislature has to give them that increase. And the Game Commission has tried for a number of years now to get that increase, and a very modest increase. QDMA has supported that numerous times for the reasons that you pointed out. We are going to have a huge deficit, and we have to have this. Our license prices are very low compared to many other states, and I certainly understand not wanting to pay more for it. But the reality of it is, if we want to continue, the high quality of hunting and wildlife management that we have here in Pennsylvania, we need to fund our agency.
Right.
And the license fee increase would be the absolute perfect way to do that. The Game Commission has tried repeatedly, has not gotten it. So I think that's why they then at least, talked about the potential of adding a second buck tag. They would much rather, though, just have a license fee increase that, was very fair to hunters and more adequately funded them. And the thing is, I think the majority of hunters in Pennsylvania would support that as well. We certainly realize that it costs more, if you go to a ball game today or a movie or something. So,
right.
We have to pay more for hunting as well.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. And I think one of the things too, it's like, if in everything in business is a negotiation, right? So we give you, just call it $1, right, for the license or whatever it is, $1.50, $2, whatever it happens to be. As a hunter, it's like you're looking for, what do I get in return? And in return, I'm happy to give that for just knowing that my state agencies are going to be funded to be able to do the job that they wish to do, right? So that's enough for me. But if we need more than that, it's like I'm willing to buy Sunday hunting. You know what I mean, for $2 extra on my license. So how do you feel about Sunday hunting? Do you feel it's something that Pennsylvania should look to do? Because I know that we're one of like the only, if not the only state that doesn't hunt on Sundays.
Yeah, we are one of the last ones. There's just a few left. I'm also a fan of Sunday hunting. I have managed deer in other states that allowed it. I've hunted in other states that allowed it. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we can't hunt, deer and turkeys and other things here, particularly given the fact that we're losing hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And so many kids today, have to play sports on Saturday. They either have no opportunity or almost no opportunity to hunt, where Sunday would provide so much more. We have supported that bill as well numerous times, to allow Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania. And I always joke, I have written, I can't tell you how many letters for Sunday hunt. And I always joke and say, for everyone I write, my wife writes one that opposes Sunday.
Right. It's the only day you're home.
She doesn't do that. But, if people don't want to hunt on Sunday, they don't have to.
Right.
Man, there's so many, particularly so many kids that would tremendously benefit from that opportunity. So I think it's absolutely crazy that we can't hunt on Sundays in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I think the good news is that it's at least, I'm starting to see a little bit more noise about it, starting to see, some, outlets, media outlets picking it up and talking about it a little bit more. So my hope is that as long as the conversation is continuing to happen, that, hopefully at some point, at least in my day, I'll be able to see some Sunday hunting, which would be great. Another kind of thing that's, controversial to a degree in Pennsylvania, like some people love it, some people hate it, is the antler restriction, right? Like me personally, I can speak from personal experience. I love it personally. I think that the deer that I had the opportunity to hunt when I was growing up as a kid, in comparison to the deer that I am seeing now in the similar areas, because my family's all still from that same area of Pennsylvania, it's night and day, the type of deer that we're seeing. And you're now starting to see some legit, trophy styled, bucks coming out of Pennsylvania. Like every year now you're seeing someone, there was someone behind my mom and my stepdad's house that killed a 167-inch deer this past year in archery season. This older woman did it. So, I guess talk to me a little bit about the antler restrictions and how that's kind of working for Pennsylvania.
It's working extremely well for Pennsylvania. It's doing exactly what they wanted it to do. It's protecting the majority of yearling bucks and letting the majority of deer that are 2.5 or older be eligible for harvest. So it is working extremely well. And the majority of Pennsylvania hunters support it. Support for that is been maintained, well over 60% of our hunters So that's a very good thing. It continues then to focus more effort or more harvest effort on antlerless deer. So we're shooting about the right number of antlerless deer each year. We're protecting the majority of our yearling bucks. We have great age structure. Antler restrictions has been extremely good for Pennsylvania deer herds and certainly for our hunting opportunities.
Nice. So I know I'm kind of skipping around here a little bit, but as we're talking, it's like things just kind of keep popping into my head. I want to just kind of take like two steps back and kind of focus on the aspect of dwindling hunting numbers and how that impacts the overall cost. Because as I was flipping through the report, and hate to go back to like the depressing topic of CWD, but it's just such a an important topic that I want to make sure that I kind of cover it and ask all the questions that I have about it. I know that I was reading in there that the average cost of CWD test kit, hasn't changed much from 2008 to 2016, and the cost range has kind of changed, or has I guess a rather large chasm, if you will, from like roughly $10 to like $100. Why, I guess, is the range so large between what it might cost in one place versus another? And then are there different types of CWD tests that are being used throughout different state agencies?
Great question. There are a couple of different types of CWD tests. Most are using the same type, and most of the tests cost about the same. And when we asked that question to our state wildlife agency survey to provide the information for our whitetail report, our intent was to just find out what does the actual test itself cost. Mm-hmm. What we found out when states answered is some states answered just what the test cost, $10 or $20. Others included what the test cost plus their labor cost mm-hmm. for acquiring those CWD samples. So that's why you see some states say $90 or $100, while others say 10 or 20. So it turned out it was our fault. We didn't ask the question clearly enough, or just didn't ask a good question, I guess. Right. But that's why you see such a huge range. But what we found in some of the follow-up calls is the actual test itself, that $10 to $20 range is pretty safe. Mm-hmm. But what it costs an agency for each of those samples to have them tested with manpower and all that is a whole lot closer to $100 per sample, which is just incredibly expensive. Right. And in money that, if CWD wasn't there, we could be using for habitat enhancement and hunter access issues and that kind of thing, which, boy, sure would be a lot nicer to use the money on that than have to use it on these.
Yeah. So in general, like, I'm not sure if you would know this or not, but, just on average, take a state agency, whether it's, Pennsylvania or Ohio or Michigan or wherever, on average, what are most states spending annually on CWD testing? Do you have a kind of a general figure for that?
Boy, I don't. I don't know what exactly that would be. I do know
more than we would like.
What's that?
I said more than we would like, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. It's a lot of money. And no, not discrediting the agencies at all. I'm glad they're spending it on it so that we can learn as much as we can about, distribution of the disease and where it is. So it's money that they're being forced to spend on it.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot for sure.
Right. And so for anyone out there that's kind of thinking about taking folks, out hunting and recruitment, so I'm going to circle back to like the whole idea of hunter recruitment, right? So the dwindling hunting numbers affecting the overall dollars that are being contributed to the economy, not just the hunting economy, right, but the economy at large. And of course, a portion of that goes into, toward our state agencies and stuff like that. I guess let's talk a little bit about the impact that those dwindling hunting numbers have on the opportunity to fund important research for CWD or important testing that states could do or can do. I'm assuming that there's a direct through line from like that number drop to the amount of money that we can then put toward trying to figure out how to manage CWD the most effective way.
Yeah, then basically for every hunter that we have, they buy a hunting license and they buy hunting items. And the monies from those two are what fund most of our agencies. So every time we lose a hunter, it's taking money right out of the budget that our agencies have to, manage wildlife, for disease surveillance, habitat work, all of that. So there is an absolute direct line in the vast majority of states. There's a couple states that it's not quite as cut and dry, but in almost every state, for every hunter you lose, your wildlife management program takes a hit. So and that's not a good thing.
Right. So one more question, and then I want to talk to you about a hunting story that you might have to be able to share with us. But I'm not sure if this is in your wheelhouse or not. But I think that you're of course an excellent resource to bounce this off of. Is, as I understand it, as you had mentioned, whenever you buy a hunting license, right, or you're buying hunting gear, right, and you're paying it's a Pittman-Robertson Act, right, tax, or your excise tax, that money is all being funneled directly into the different various, some type of kitty, if you will, that's then being dispersed to the various state agencies to support, habitat, wildlife, conservation, et cetera. So, I think my personal opinion is, and I would love to just kind of get your thoughts on this, is that we're at a place now where as much as I love the support that a lot of non-consumptive, outdoor users or non-consumptive, outdoor, proponents contribute to the economy in terms of, buying hiking boots or shoes or whatever the case might be, what they end up paying is they pay a similar tax, right, on what they're using or what they're purchasing, but it's in the form of a tariff, right, if I'm not mistaken. And then that money then is funneled into the Treasury. And at that point, that money is then broken up by however the Treasury determines that its budget's going to be spent, or how it's going to be, the pie is going to be divided up among any number of things, from, giving money toward road construction to public education to whatever the case might be. And so that the part of the pie that we get from non-consumptive users is much smaller than the pie we get from hunters. I think, I'm just curious if, from your opinion, is it time to start asking some of these folks to do more from a financial perspective? Considering that we're losing the amount of hunters that we have, or that number continues to dwindle.
Oh, I think it absolutely is. And a non-consumptive user, a perfect example is take a non-consumptive user that goes on, our state game lands in Pennsylvania. They use the roads, they use the trails, they're looking for the wildlife. That's all of that costs money, to purchase those, to manage those. It's just because they choose to not shoot something when they're there. In my opinion, all of the other stuff, that the benefits they get, should not be free. They should be in their way as well. That has never come to fruition, but I think that it absolutely should in the United States. Particularly given that as we continue to lose hunter numbers. But even if we weren't losing hunters, even if we had hunters, I'm a firm believer. All the stakeholders should have a seat at the table, and they should pay their way. And so, just because your passion is, bird watching, you're not killing songbirds. Those songbirds wouldn't be there if they weren't managed properly, and that management takes money. So I think anybody who is enjoying those natural resources, all the precious ones that we have, ought to be contributing to the management of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, look, there's plenty of days where I buy a license and I end up just taking my bow or gun for a walk, because there's plenty of days I walk out of the woods without filling a tag, right? So
that's for sure. A lot more days that you take them for a walk than you actually use them.
That's right. Hey, Kip, I want to be sensitive to your time here. I know we've kept you here. I've kept you here just about an hour, and I always like to end with a personal hunting story that's meaningful to our guests. So if you wouldn't mind, give us a story, a hunting story that you've had. It could be a near miss. It could be the one that got away. It could be, a great harvest or whatever the case might be. But give us every detail about where you were hunting, what type of time of year it was, and all the details from the time you left your truck back to the tailgate.
All right. Actually, I talked earlier about my daughter's first deer this past year in archery season, and her first buck in rifle season. So those were two of the most memorable hunts ever. But since I kind of alluded to those earlier, I'll pick a different one right now.
All right.
And this was from this past hunting season. It was opening day of our rifle season. So that morning was when my daughter shot her buck. I have one brother and then three nephews. So my son is 9, my daughter is 11. And then I have 3 nephews, one that's 14, and then there's a boy, and then twin boys who just turned 12. So the twins are essentially the same age as my daughter. Mm-hmm. And my brother had his 3 kids with him, and I had my daughter with me. Well, after my daughter shot hers, I got with my brother, and I said, hey, let me take one of your boys now. I can mentor them, and so we'll get his rifle and go. So one of the twins came with me, and that afternoon, we went to a different spot. We're in the stand. Actually, we're in a tower blind, looking over this food plot that my daughter and my son and I had planted. And in this, we had my daughter went along to watch, my son went along to watch, and then I am mentoring my 11-year-old nephew. And it turns out he sat there, and actually a spiked buck came into the field. And Justin has shot one deer up to this point, or one buck up to this point, and two deer. So he shot a buck 2 years ago, and then one antlerless deer this past early antlerless season. So we had two deer to his credit. So still, a brand new hunter that had some success for sure. Mm-hmm. And the spiked buck jumps into the field. And in our camp, all of the adults, our rules are, let's shoot a buck that's 3 or older, or has a 16-inch inside spread. Your choice.
Right.
And some guys at camp won't shoot a 3-year-old. Some will shoot any 3-year-old. But so that works good for us. So that's what we go with. But the kids are encouraged, or they're allowed and encouraged to shoot anything they want. And so the spike buck jumps into the field, and I said, "Oh, you see it, Justin?" Yeah. And as he starts to get nervous, immediately this 10-point comes into the field right behind the spike. And there's no doubt what deer now he wants to shoot. And the 10, actually a young deer as well. And I estimated it 2.5 years old. So, but certainly, looks way bigger than this spike.
Right.
And so I asked Justin, like, what do you want? And he just looked at me, he, "Oh, Uncle Kip, I want the big one." I said, "Good for you, buddy. That's the one I want you to shoot too." And he was so nervous. He's sitting there and he's trying to, and I said, "Hey, buddy, isn't this exciting?" He said, "I'm really nervous, Uncle Kip." I said, "That is great, buddy. That is why hunting is so exciting. I'm excited too. My heart is beating fast. Yours is beating fast." I said, "This is what makes it so much fun." So, calm down. You're a good shot. So getting back on the gun, I said, "All right, breathe slowly with me. Breathe in, breathe out real slowly, and just squeeze that trigger and make sure you see that bullet, hit through the scope. You keep your eye on that scope the whole time." And what made it really cool is he was sitting on a stool in a blind, and he said, "Uncle Kip, I'm afraid the gun is going to knock me off the stool." And he was shooting my daughter's .243. I said, "It's not going to, buddy. You're good." So my daughter leaned up, and they're very close, actually starts rubbing his back and said, "Justin, I will stand behind you so that the gun can't kick you off." So he's like, "Oh, okay, thank you, Katie, thank you." And that made all the difference in the world to him. So my son is standing there. He's watching. I'm talking Justin through this shot. My heart is racing like crazy. Like I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm about to have a heart attack. My daughter is rubbing my nephew's back, and I just looked around and I thought, you know what? Right now, everything is right in the world.
Yep.
I have no idea what's going to happen when he pulls the trigger. I was very confident that he would make a good shot, but you never know. Particularly as excited as he was, he could have missed it by a mile. But looking at here, I have my nephew with me. We see a deer. My son is here. My daughter is here. All three of them are working so hard together to help Justin get this deer. So you know what? Right now, everything is right in the world. And so finally, he got calmed down enough. The deer presented a great shot. He shot, and it was apparent he made a tremendous hit. And the deer ran about 30 yards and died right there. So the four of us got to get to it together and celebrate together before we get back to camp. And then obviously my brother gets there and sees it. But for those few minutes where it was just us, I thought, you know what? I feel so sorry for people who don't hunt and people who will never get to experience the magic of the woods. It was just absolutely outstanding and such a touching moment for me to watch my kids try to do everything possible to help their cousin, and to watch how appreciative he was that they were helping. I'll never forget it for sure.
Man, that's awesome. Like it does. You're right, man. At that moment, everything was right in the world, and it doesn't get much better than that. It's you're right, and you're also right about the point of we're fortunate to have the opportunity to see some of the things that we see. I try to explain to people that view you get from a tree stand in early October, or mid to late October, early November, and watch the woods wake up. And I was like, the people that don't do this, is like they don't know what they're missing, But hey, man, I do appreciate you coming on. That's a great way to end the show. I just want to say thank you, for all the work that you and QDMA do. Very appreciative of the efforts you guys put put in to make sure that we continue to have this, this hunting heritage that we have and push it forward and make sure that it's here to pass on to future generations. You guys are the good guys, and can't thank you enough for what you do. So appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you. I've certainly enjoyed talking with you, and thank you for being a QDMA member and a hunter and doing all the educational stuff that you do to share information with others. So, certainly good luck this turkey season and good luck this fall. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. Hey, but before I let you go, man, let's give us a couple places where people can find more information about maybe you or QDMA if they want to get involved.
All right. They can go to our website, which is qdma.com. And on that, we have all kinds of information there to help them, from a hunting end, from a deer biology end, or a habitat enhancement end. The Whitetail report that we talked about tonight, we have written 10 of those now, 10 annual reports. Those are all free downloads. So we have a ton of information available there for hunters, and we want them to grab it and use it. It's there to help. And we say at QDMA, it's where deer hunters belong. Whether you're a new hunter, a veteran hunter, bow hunter, rifle hunter, whatever, at QDMA, we fight hard for your hunters' hunting rights, and we'd love to have you be a member if you choose.
And make sure you give them a follow as well on Facebook and Instagram. Always good content, always good people. Can't say enough good things about what you guys do. So appreciate you coming on, Kip. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Clint. Have a great time.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. We'd like to thank Kip for joining us. Be sure to visit QDMA at qdma.com and become a member today. It's not a ton of money, and the Quality Whitetail magazine that you get with your membership is well worth the $35 membership fee. Of course, QDMA puts out a ton of great content, and the money, of course, goes to a great cause. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you do those two things for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, and Trophy Taker Rests. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all. It takes a special knowing to color for. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I